And we are live. Welcome to the Awakening Educator. As always, I'm Susan Andrian.
I'm Megan Sweet.
And we are so excited today to have Peaches with us. I got an opportunity to meet Peaches when I was in Illinois at she was the keynote speaker at the Trauma Informed Relationship Conference. And so I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Susan, Megan, thank you so much for this opportunity. As you said, my name is Peaches. My given name is Ovella Lott. And interesting enough, people don't always remember Ovella, but they remember Peaches. And Peaches is a nickname that was given to me in childhood by one of my aunties. And so it has been the name that children can pronounce. Mm-hmm. And so I've been Peach. I've been Peachy. I've been Mr. Peach, Miss Peach. And so it was just easier in early care and education to have children say Peaches than to try to figure out all of the Ovella. So that's what the name is all about. So I currently work at University City Children's Center Loom Institute as a early childhood specialist. And part of my role is going out into the community and really nurturing the souls of educators, helping them connect with young children as emotional partners. And I tell you, this is some of the most rewarding work that I've ever done. I've worked as an educator in early care and education. I've owned my own home daycare. I've been a center director, curriculum specialist, you name it. I have been up and down and around the corner in the field of early care and education. But I'm finding that this role that I'm in right now, it has been the most rewarding because I get to be with educators and I get to hold their souls as they strive to be their best selves for young children. So that's kind of, I'm a young girl. I'm just in my early 50s.
You're in good company.
You're in good company. That's the
yes. I have 5 wonderful children and 19, if you believe it or not, grandchildren.
19.
Yes, 19. We're such a blended family, and family is everything to me. And so I am excited about talking tonight and just getting into some content.
Peaches, I'm so excited that you're here. I'm not surprised that you met Susan at a trauma-informed conference, because I do know my co-host well. And I can't think of anything more important right now. And I loved what you said. You didn't hear me because I have my mic on mute, but when you said nurturing the soul of educators, I said, which is what is really needed right now is nurturing the soul of educators. And really, I think a lot of my work has been trying to help educators connect back with their soul, because I think we get kind of disconnected sometimes. So I'd love to hear from you. What does nurturing the soul of an educator look like to you?
Well, you know what, Megan, as you were talking, I was thinking about a very young educator that I met as a center director at University City Children's Center. And I walked into the classroom and this beautiful young woman was there for a teach-in. And so I come in to introduce myself. And as soon as I walk into the classroom, she begins with what I call this teacher ease, right? She starts talking and testing the children that are around her. She's like, "Hi, boys and girls. How are you? And what color is this? And how many do you have?" And she's finding herself trying to impress the director, right? When really I'm looking like, child, baby, stop. Like, enough, right? And so when we had a moment to come together and sit down and talk, I was able to ask her the question, who are you? Who are you? And who are you in the life of children? And why do you want to be with children? It has nothing to do with, colors and numbers and all of these types of things. Let's get to the root of it. What was your childhood experience? And what about that experience do you want children to have or not have?
Mm.
What was your upbringing like? Who supported you? Who didn't support you? And so this educator is sitting there with tears in her eyes going, no one's ever asked me these questions in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, I said, this is what we need to do. We need to get to the core of who we are so that we can show up differently for young children. This is not just a job. It is, but it isn't, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we want to be able to allow these teachers to go deeper and understand who they are so that they can show up wholeheartedly for children and families. And the way that we do that is that we have to hold them. And so I had to provide a safe space, a trusting space where she could open up and give herself permission to say, my childhood was or wasn't wonderful. My
Mm-hmm.
upbringing was or wasn't what I expected. But I'm going to show up for children.
I love that, Peaches. I mean, I think it aligns with a lot of what we've talked about. And I happen to write a book where I talk a lot about that same thing, which is we have to understand our roots and what our influences are and how that shapes the way we walk into the classroom, and experience things, because all those things that you're naming influence the way we experience day-to-day interactions, from getting our coffee at the coffee shop to teaching children to anything else, as well as how we assess, interact, or understand the people that are around us. And so learning our stories, especially our educator stories, and knowing why those are important to us, I think is such a vital piece in training educators. And we get so focused on, right, the academic side. And I'm often very impatient with that side, because I'm like, teaching can be more different and exciting, but the basics actually don't change that much. So why we spend so much time
Mm-hmm.
talking and redoing and re-examining how to teach the same things when we basically are still doing it the same way we always did. Hopefully we can start to innovate a little bit, but it's not the what we're teaching, it's the how we're teaching it that actually influences kids and how they learn. And so if we could have the best curriculum in the world, the best lesson plan in the world, but if we're teaching in a way that shuts kids down, that makes them feel unseen, that makes their identities, whether that be racial, sexual identity, or any other kind, feel under attack or not supported or seen or included in that classroom, it really doesn't matter what we put in front of them to learn.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to learn at their fullest, and we're going to impact their sense of self and who they are. So I'm just so grateful that you're doing that work and you're having those conversations with our educators, because that's where they need to start. They need to understand what their intentions are,
Yeah.
and they need to understand what their experience was and how that's going to shape the way they walk into the room every single day. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. When I got the chance to hear you tell your story and link it to, and really honor the importance of our story and you brought it in already, and thinking about this, why is it so important for teachers to really know their story and to honor who they are and honor that experience? And how does that really show up as an educator and help them be a better educator?
Yeah, there's so much that I have learned in my experience about, what happened early in my life and how it now shows up, right? And so understanding when those pieces show up, how they show up and why they're showing up is very important for educators. I was speaking with someone yesterday and I said I was in an infant classroom and the music was so loud. And not only was the music loud, but there was an experience happening with the children. There were a lot of adults in the room, and it was just so loud to me. And I found myself just being very triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And I know exactly where that comes from because I grew up in a home where people were loud and I didn't always feel like I had a place of solitude where I could just go and be still and be quiet. And so in those moments, I can be very triggered. I could snap at my coworker in one of those moments. I could snap at a child in those moments where I feel triggered. And so knowing my background, understanding where I've come from, knowing some of my triggers will help me adjust my sail and give voice to when I am uncomfortable, what's bothering me. And so for educators, when they look at their stories and own their stories, because that's the only one they have, their
Mm-hmm.
story is their story.
Mm-hmm.
As joyful and as painful as it may be, it is their story. When they are able to become more comfortable with that story, they can give voice to it, and they can say in a moment, you know what, it's not you. I know exactly where this is coming from, and
Mm-hmm.
I need to take a moment. Please excuse me. And
Mm-hmm.
so not
Mhm.
that you keep covering it and burying it, but you realize it, you recognize it, and you begin to work through it. That's where healing starts to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're
Mm-hmm.
sitting with this child, and this child is crying and saying, you know, I miss my mommy, I miss my mommy. And then all of a sudden, you start to go to that place where you're holding your mom's hand who's dying from cancer, right? And so there's these transferences that are happening as it relates to what our stories are. So we have to know our stories. We have to recognize when stuff comes up, when we're being triggered, so that we can adjust ourselves in a way that can give voice to our needs, as well as know when we might be in danger of sucking the life out of children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, you're what you're saying just resonates so much with me around knowing ourselves. I actually did this activity where I just tracked my own thoughts in meetings for a week. I'm mostly in meetings, so that's where my life is like. It's mostly sitting in meetings. So that's why I was tracking myself in that way. But I would just take note of what thoughts went through my head and what I was feeling in my body as I was sitting there. And I like to think I'm pretty confident. I like to think I'm pretty self-aware. I like, to think that I'm sassy and I have all sorts of stuff going. However, what I saw in my notes was fear played out over and over and over again. Anytime I spoke up in the meeting, my immediate thought was, I'm going to get fired. Someone's going to hate me. Someone's going to like immediate fear of expulsion and being pushed away. And it was so interesting to see that, because I couldn't doubt it. It was my own data. It was my own head. It was my own thoughts. I knew I had those thoughts, but I wasn't aware of the frequency of them and how much they were influencing me. And I went back and did my own, like, okay, why is talking an issue? And started to kind of unpack that, which helped me to understand the why. But it also helps me in the moment now. When I speak up, I know that that little voice might show up or that fear might show up. And so I've also developed some coping mechanisms for how to like soothe that, calm that. So I'm a big believer in self-compassion and self-care because I think when we start to know ourselves, we need some tools to know
Mm-hmm.
how to love ourselves a
Mm-hmm.
lot more because it can be really painful acknowledging what's there, especially if what we're acknowledging, we're acknowledging how we're causing harm to our students. So for me, as a white woman, I've had to contend a lot with a number of times and places where the things I've said to my students, and I've primarily always taught with students who didn't share my identity, um, was harmful. It wasn't my intention. It wasn't my goal. No one, I don't think, I still believe, although they're not always great teachers, no one goes into education with a desire to cause harm to kids. There's faster, easier ways to do that than going through the training and the hard work to become an educator. We do harm anyway. Um, but for me, I think, especially as we start to confront the impact of white supremacy and systemic racism in the classroom or implicit
Mm-hmm.
bias and how that's influencing the way we're seeing our kids, if we also can have some tools of like not beating ourselves up, not, like using that as more reasons why we're a bad or deficient person is so important. That was my soapbox. I'll get off of it now. But I'd love to hear from you. Like, so as we start to work with ourselves, what do you say to those teachers, or how do you help them to work with what starts to, that teacher that's crying, once they start to unpack, what is the next step in your mind around that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Tears are usually, a sign of water breaking, right? I see it as, okay, you think about labor. So, there's something that's breaking there. And so that's a good sign when I see teachers begin to kind of break, because now they're vulnerable enough, and they know that something needs to change, and they're willing to hear differently. And so when I think about it, we talk a lot in our society about wanting change. We want change. And so I just believe if we want this change, we have to change the way that we're teaching our youngest children and how we're supporting the educators in their lives. And a way that we can do that is that we have to be present. We have to be present as the leaders who can be attuned to the workers in the same ways that we're asking them to be attuned to the children and families. We are asking educators to go in and pretty much be therapists and nurses and educators and lawyers and just about everything that you can imagine. And they have a bundle of their own stuff. And so if we are not committed in our society to support educators in using and finding their voice in healthy ways, I think that our field is going to be in trouble. So to answer your question, the way I do it is going to look completely different from how others do it. But I create safe space and genuine relationship.
Yeah, that's the way. Yeah.
That's what I got. And I promote good reflective practice because I believe that reflective teachers are the best teachers. And so I ask them the hard questions. I allow them to go deep, but I'm there. I'm present with them while they're doing it. I'm not going to leave them by themselves. I let them know it's going to be hard. This isn't easy, but you got someone here with you.
So I'm curious, because one of the things that as you're talking, I'm like, yes, right. Yes. And time, I'm thinking about these barriers to our educator and how much time it takes to have the breadth to be able to have the time to reflect and be vulnerable. And just even what you're saying about being present with them and being with them, that incorporating that practice of supervision or time with your supervisor or time to reflect on your practice and time to really be able to pause and untangle all of this. I'm wondering how you're able to support the schools that you support and the teachers that you support to make sure that time is, because that's the thing that's always the hardest thing to keep in schools or in communities. Like, oh, we don't have time, but we don't have time not to give time, is what I think.
Susan, let me say this. I want everybody to lean in. It is every moment and every conversation every day. It is every moment, every conversation every day. It is not about a block of 20 minutes, meet me in my office, or it's at the water cooler, it's at the coffee machine, it's in the restroom, it's in the hallway, it is eye to eye, it is every moment, every day, every conversation. And so whether it is just checking in and saying how you're doing, what am I listening for when I'm asking the question, how are you doing? What am I listening for when I say good morning? What is the tone that's coming back at me? What is the facial expression that I'm receiving as we're walking, towards each other? Is there a smile on your face? Is there a frown? This is what we're asking educators to do with children and families. And so as leadership, it is every day, every moment, and every conversation that we must be attuned and we need to take advantage of it. How are you? What's going up? What are the things that we know about each other that we can check in on? How's your cat doing? I heard you went on vacation. Oh, did you get your hair cut? Oh, I love those new glasses. People need to be seen and they need to be heard. And so just those moments of feeling seen and heard allows me to know that when I need to have a bigger or harder conversation, I have a safe place to go.
I love what you said around this is what we ask teachers to do, right? We ask teachers to be on 100% of the time when they're with their kids, paying attention to how they're looking at them. What is their body language like? What is their facial expression? How are they interacting? What are their connections with kids? And you're right, often as leaders, and I'm guilty of that as a principal right now. Like if I'm have something on my mind, I'll have my head down and I'm like charging to a direction. And I know people are watching me, but I'm like, I'm tired right now. I don't want to, but you're right. It's, that's not the right moment. That's not the right move. Like with the way that we move around as leaders with our staff and the way we make them feel helps them also to show up for their students in a different way. So I just love that mentioning. So thank you.
So we are at our, it's hard to believe, but we are already at our first break. So we're going to take a quick break, and it's very quick for those of us on Facebook and YouTube right now. And we will be right back. And when we come back, what I really want to talk about is thinking about, we often talk about what the kids need and don't do enough to talk about what the teachers need. And then we talk about what the teachers need and we don't do enough to talk about what the leaders need in order to show up in the way that Megan's just talking about. Because I support 18 principals, and thinking about, as you were just saying that, I was thinking about them and sort of the cascade that we're experiencing in this moment. And I also really want to think about the window of time that you're working at, which is this early childhood education, which is such a critical, like we have so much opportunity to invest in that moment. So when we come back, those are the two things I'm hoping we can dig in a little bit more. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we are back. It's so
makes
funny.
Me laugh every time. It's
every
ridiculous,
time.
Peaches. Every time we're like, okay, we'll be right back. And it's like 5 seconds. But sorry, podcast world, if you listen to the podcast, you know that we laugh every single time because we just can't stop being tickled about this like break. It's the silliest thing ever. Go ahead, Susan.
No, go ahead. So before we were going out on the break, I was talking about the cascade of needs of how taxed our system is right now, from the teachers to the leaders to the administrators. And as we're thinking about this culture of self-care, this culture of vulnerability, this culture of knowing our stories, and the dosing of what you're talking about is that this is not in 20-minute blocks or in your supervision. This is us providing doses of relational connection at every level of our school, of every level of our community throughout the entire day. And that includes showing up when folks are in joy and showing up for folks when they're in pain. And how do we create this culture that allows for that?
Mm-hmm. Well, ladies, I'm going to be honest with you. I had to create my own circle because being in leadership can be a very lonely place. Mm-hmm. And there were so many times where I did not have the comrades or the people in my center or in my space where I could go to. I didn't have people I could talk to who could understand. I didn't have people who I felt comfortable sharing with. And so I had to make an effort on my own to seek out people who would help to, and we talk about filling buckets, who would help to fill my buckets. I needed to make sure that my buckets were being filled on a day-to-day basis. And the buckets I'm referring to are my sense of love, my sense of belonging, and my sense of appropriate power. And so as I am giving all of this to educators and to families and children and others, I needed a circle that was strong enough to be able to give that to me. And so for leaders, we have to recognize that this place of leadership can be a very lonely place. And so we have to create intentionally our safe places where we can go and refill. We talk about self-care. I talk about soul care. Baby, I need to have my soul stirred up as well. I need my heart checked too. And so there are days when I'm just like, do your job. Can you just show up and do your job, right?
I'm relieved to hear you said it.
Just show up and do your job. That's what I need. And I need everybody to leave me alone so I can do my job. And it isn't always so, because you have that educator who's coming with the kid in hand, and the child is looking at you, in their mischief, and the teacher has that frown on her face. And it's like, okay, let me get it together so that I can give the support and collaborate and do everything that I need. And at the end of the day, I need to make sure that I am refilling my buckets so that I can do it again. So many times in my role as leadership, I walked around with my buckets being damaged and leaking and causing sickness and all kinds of things. And it just was not good. I was not in a well place. I was not productive. And I was losing myself. And so the answer is not, a fit all, a treat all, but I think that there is an awareness that we have to take care of ourselves, give ourselves permission to listen to our bodies, our minds, and our souls, seek out the circle of trust and care that we need when we need it, and make no apologies for that.
I love that. I mean, Susan's part of my circle. So a huge believer in that. And, it is, I think, the primary way that we can start to change the tone of the schools when we start to take care of ourselves and, find ways that we can fill our buckets. And what I heard you say is that, it's not necessarily the staff or the school that's filling that bucket for us. And I think that's a really important thing for us to know and pay attention to. And I think sometimes as educators, we get so stuck on the service side or on the mission side or what have you that, and I know I've been guilty of it, that I deplete myself, but then I also have this, tacit expectation that the people that I've been being so nice to and giving to are then supposed to give back to me. And that's not how it works as a leader. So that's a disappointing truth.
Disappointment, isn't it?
It's not their job. So it's really important that we find a place outside of school, and it's on us to find that circle of colleagues, of family, and going back to what you're talking about, knowing ourselves enough to know what it is that's going to fill us back up again, and being unapologetic about taking that time. So thank you for those reminders.
Yeah.
It's the collective too. So I really appreciate that we're seeking out, because we talk a lot about self-care, but I really am moving to this collective care and this collective way of being, because I also think it's contagious, right? So if we're bringing more joy into the spaces that we're at, and I 100% agree, we can't be leaning on the people we're supporting. We're not going to get it back from them. We have to find our own place to go get it. But it is contagious when we bring joy into the workplace, when we feel, and joy not being like happy all the time, but genuine like joy and playfulness and engagement, that's contagious too. And then it feels less depleting when the environments we're in are filled with joy.
I also know that some of us in these leadership roles are not in the right seats.
Yes.
And we're struggling with that as well. And so we're not happy anymore. We're not finding our rhythm anymore. And education is a huge field, and there is place for everyone. But this leadership, this top leadership and management role, it's a hard place to be. And so when when your joy is being depleted in such a way that you cannot keep your head up, I I just offer, people to just do a real gut and heart check, because you can find another avenue within this field to nourish and support families, but it is not worth you being unhappy and unhealthy. uh,
Mm-hmm.
Children need happy, whole adults. And so I love how you said, Susan, about, exuding this joy and this happiness. I know when I come into the early childhood center at University City Children's Center, I want to spread sunshine. I want everyone to experience a piece of Miss Peaches in a powerful way, right? I want to
I
be
want to experience that too.
like that is what's in my head. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
who can I inspire today? Where can I give the hug? Where can I give the help? And this is what I want to be able to do. And there was a time in my life where that was not where I was.
Mm.
And I go back and I say, the role that I'm in now is such a good fit for me, because it allows me to walk in my truth. This is who I am. I am a person who inspires. I am a person who serves. I am a person who listens. I am a person who loves to care for and be with. And so in my role now, I can do that with educators.
So we have a
I love
question
that.
here about what leaders can do, because you're talking about it, is what can leaders do to set the example for self-care? And I think you've touched on it a little bit. And so it's this practice, and it's sharing it and sort of making sure that there's some space. I'd love to hear what you do to model. So you can, and there's some other comments here. Let me just say that people are singing Peaches praises in the chat.
I'm not surprised. I'm gonna follow. I want to like just I need like as you're talking Peaches, I'm like, it'd be great is if you created like an app or something like a daily Peaches affirmation, because I would be on that. I was like, I need this energy, but I mean, I want to answer that question, but I think what really inspired me about what you just said is that you reconnect with your why and with your intention every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get lost oftentimes as leaders. We go in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited, motivated, ready to go, just like we did when we were teachers or social workers, whatever caring profession we have in education. And then we get hit by the real world and the challenges of the real world and the bureaucracies and just the pain and the suffering that so many of our kids are going through and our families are going through. And at some point, so many of us get lost. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly we're there because that's just what we know how to do, or that's like we get stuck, we lose our mission, or there's a mission creep in some way. So I love hearing you say, and I think it's a self-care strategy, but I'd love to hear your other self-care strategies. But that idea of reminding yourself every day, what is my why? How can I do it? I heard you say, I want to look for people that I can give this energy to because I know this is my why. And finding places and being unapologetic about finding places that are going to let you thrive. If you're in a space that's not going to let you thrive and grow, you're not serving anyone by continuing to stay. You might think you are, but if you're dimmed, you're not helping other people.
Yeah, yeah. Susan, remember when we were together at in Quincy for
Mm-hmm.
the Chaddock conference? I had everybody kind of say this to each other. I see you. You're enough, and you're doing enough.
We were all in tears because I don't think Angela's going to mind that I'm outing her, but the two of us were both, just saying that to each other was so powerful.
Yeah.
Just sitting and looking each other in the eye and saying those words was extremely powerful. And, I think that's the thing, the feeling seen and feeling enough. Right. And that's really what we're all striving so hard. And so that was a huge modeling
Yeah.
of just tuning in and to ourselves, being able
Yeah.
to give ourselves the appreciation and the acceptance for who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
and again, I try to give voice to you know, those things that I do well and those things that I, you know, have as areas of growth. And I try to be as authentic and truthful about those things. And so I try to model that as much as I can every day with every human being that I encounter. And again, what I do and how I do it is it looks and feels completely different. But I find myself just in Steve Zwolak, our ED at UCCC, says this all the time. I find myself just getting in the puddle with other people and just being in the moment. And so as leaders, one of the ways that we model is we don't have to, I'm not getting in the puddle to fix you. I'm not getting in the puddle to examine you. I'm just going to be. And so one of the ways that we can model this is that if we can just show up and be and allow people to the permission, if they need to ask, if they need more than just you being, then allow them to do that. But just showing up and being is probably one of the best models that we can give people, that I'm here.
Yeah, that's really
I
powerful.
love that. I mean, I think often we like, there's a school leader that I'm thinking of right now, and she works just nonstop. She's an incredibly hard worker, but she would do this thing, which I think was like well-intentioned, but I would say the wrong call, which was she would tell everyone, okay, it's time to go home. It's 3:30, 4 o'clock. Everyone go home. You know, you've worked really hard today, go home. But everyone knew that she'd be staying another 4 hours or so at that school, continuing to work. And it made people feel like they didn't, I mean, they felt connected to her. So they wanted to also stay with her, but they also felt like, well, if my boss is working these 4 extra hours, I should stay too. And I think unintentionally created this space where folks couldn't do it. So just being, I think, is enough. And also that modeling of like, right, it's time for us all to go home. We're all going to give back to ourselves right now and do whatever's important. And the work will wait. And really modeling that for ourselves feels so important.
I made those mistakes myself, Megan. I've done the exact same thing. And one of the things that, you know, we know as parents and we know as educators is that they're watching what we do and not always listening to what we say, right? And so I've made lots of those mistakes by modeling one thing and doing another. And I think it also takes, when someone calls you on it, how do you respond? So if someone were to say to her, you know, well, I'm going to stay because I don't want you to do it all by yourself, or I don't want you to feel like you're in this all by yourself. And, you know, us will make excuses and say, no, you know, it's okay. You go home. I got this covered. What is that saying to them? You know, there's a call out there that we need to look at what we're telling people is okay and not okay. We need to look at our attitudes, our beliefs, our practices, and are they aligning with what we want people to truly see as a way to be with children and families and to be with this work.
It's so true. And one of the things I say to all of the people that I support that work in schools is there's always going to be more work than you are ever going to be able to finish, no matter how many hours you stay. You could stay till midnight and there would still be more work that you could do, but it's not, you're not doing the work that needs to be done, which is taking care of yourself to be able to show up tomorrow and be full of joy and ready to be there. So it's so hard because the working hard, but working in a way that doesn't actually translate to what the children need, which is a loving person to show up for them.
Or a loving supervisor to show up.
Yeah, a loving supervisor and a loving all the way through the system.
Right.
And there's always more work.
Right. And the relationship
Mm-hmm.
is more important, right?
Mm-hmm.
These relationships that we're building, I believe in our office, there are about 5 of us in our office, and we get some of the best work done in just our relational conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking, we're collaborating, we're problem solving, and it just feels so good and so natural. And by the time, you turn back around to your desk, to your computer, it's kind of like, whoa, that was pretty cool, right? I just got so much accomplished. And so those relationships should be driving the work. And so, how do we work harder and model the importance of relationships is a
Mm-hmm.
question, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If
It's
we,
well, it's such a big question because not only relationships, but and you said the word earlier, but trust as well. Because when those things are missing, it doesn't actually, back to my curriculum example, it doesn't matter how fine you have set up your school, even how technically good you are as a leader or as a teacher. If there isn't trust and if the relationships aren't there, we're not going to be able to grow and learn. And as leaders, when we don't establish those relational connections and we don't build trust, believe us, and I know you know this, you pay for it on the back end. Like you might be
Mm-hmm.
fast and efficient on the front end to get something done. You will pay for it down the line
Mm-hmm.
with questions, confusion, mistrust, hurt feelings. Like it's,
Mm-hmm.
it not only does it feel better for you, feel better for your staff when you take the time to build that trust and develop deep relationships, because that's what's the most gratifying for us as educators, is that more than pay, there's research that shows it. But even if you don't believe any of those things, it will, if you don't have trust, if you haven't built those relationships, you will spend a lot more time on emails and whatever, all the other things that show up for that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
time well spent on every possible angle. I so appreciate you saying that. We're almost at 40 minutes. I'm wondering if this is a good time to take a break. And I still want to talk about early childhood education.
Yeah.
Because it's a hot topic in the country, definitely in California here. And again, I think it's the place where we have some of the greatest influence on our future leaders. So I'd love for us to talk a little bit about that when we come back from break.
So we will
So
be
let's go on
right
break.
back.
Yep.
And we're back.
Welcome back, everyone. Just before we went on break, I was saying that I wanted to make good on the suggestion we had coming back from the last break, which is to hear a bit about early childhood education, which is what we call it in California. I think you were calling it something else, Peaches, maybe early care. So what is it about that age group that's drawn you in? I think would be really exciting to hear, because everybody has their age group that they love. Mine's middle schoolers, so we're going to give you all you need to know about me. But it would be helpful to hear about that from you.
And I've done TK all the way up through high school. So I've.
Well, what's your favorite, Susan? I know you have a favorite. Tell on yourself. It's because I think it's a personality test. This is my long held theory that whatever age group you gravitate towards, there's like a personality link in there.
Well, I don't know. I liked doing clinical work at the middle school level, but I love being with the littles too. Like just the hugs and the joy and the playfulness. So I actually really like being able to get a little bit of all the ages. I feel like it fills my cup in multiple ways.
That sounds very Susan. I won't force you on it. All right.
I thought you were going to call me out some other way. I'm like, no.
We'll have that. We'll talk later.
Okay.
It sounds just like you, that you like everybody. I just know I'm a punk. So middle school is right up my alley. A little bit sassy, like to push back. Like to test the boundaries. That's what middle school kids are like, and that's what I'm like as a human. So that fits for me. But yeah, Peaches, it'd be great to hear about early childhood education, your role in it, and why you think it's so important.
Yeah, so early care and education really found me. And it's interesting because part of my story is that I was a teen mom. And so during the time that I was carrying my child, one of the most important things for me was, being the best mom to this human being. And how do I do that? Right. And so I had an aunt who was being very mean to me one day, and I happened to interject into an adult conversation. And in my family, children do not do that. And so when I spoke up in the conversation, this aunt said to me, "Shut up, little girl. You don't know anything but about making babies." And so in her insult, I internalized as an opportunity to learn about babies. And I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about babies, and especially about the baby that I was carrying at that time. And so that's kind of part of my love. And so once I started taking classes and beginning to really understand how a human being develops and what is needed, and all of the complexities around just child and child development, I fell in love. And part of it, I believe, is because I'm a nurturer. That's who I am by nature. I am a mother. I am mothering. That's who I am. I can't lie. And so babies give me a place to be my authentic self. And so in early care and education today, I think that the piece that is so exciting for me right now is the opportunity for socialization and the support of emotional development. Those are the places that really touch my heart when I see babies experience something for the very first time, when I see a baby reach for me or make eye contact or begin to do something. I get it now, and I understand it on a deeper level, and it makes so much sense to me now more than it did 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years ago. And so I am in love with early care and education. And I think that, and hopefully y'all don't throw me off the show, I don't think that we value and care for our littles, our babies.
Well, I think we 100% agree. We are on board. You are in company. We are with you 100%.
As much as we should as a society. And I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying that, these precious little ones are our future, and they are the next generation. And I think that we have really minimized their wealth and their value to cute. And often inconvenient. And that breaks my heart. And so,
sorry, go ahead, Peaches. I cut you off.
No, and I said, and so my life's work is making sure that I turn that around.
I so appreciate that. Susan's the brain science person generally, but I want to dip my toe in, and she'll tell me I said it wrong. But there's a lot of growing research that shows that our sense of selves, and we go back to what we started our conversation with at the top of the hour, which was our sense of selves, knowing ourselves, knowing what we're about, actually starts from in utero now, they think, actually. So while we're still pregnant, while the baby's still in mom, we're starting to influence and shape personality and sense of self and identity. And those things that we say to kids, what we tell them is true for them, what's possible for them, starting from the moment that they're born, kids take that in. And in those first 5 to 7 years, kids take that in without even questioning the validity of the statements that we say. So if we tell a child that they're smart and beautiful and can do anything they want, and that's the message we give them all the time, that's what they see as their truth about who they are. If we tell a child that they're a burden, or that they aren't good looking, or that they're stupid, or whatever we say out of frustration, or if we're an educator and we have biases that we haven't examined, and we are, even if we're not uttering the words, if our actions and our interactions with our kids suggest that some kids have more value or possibility than others, we are shaping the sense of self for our kids, even if we never say a word about it. And it's just so crucial that we get a hold of ourselves, and we learn how to and we take care of these young children with as the gifts that they are. So I just appreciate you saying that. I'm really soapboxy today. I don't know,
Yeah,
Peaches, I'm
yeah.
gonna blame you. I feel like you're bringing it out of me. I don't normally talk this much, so thank you.
I'd like to add to. I
Well,
think the thing that I'm curious. I agree with everything that's been said here, and I could get nerdy in the brain. I'm not going to get too nerdy in the brain today, but I do want to talk about policy and investment. And part of the thing that's so frustrating is when we're talking about providing interventions and supports for kids that are in elementary school, middle school, and high school, we could have prevented the pain and distress that those children are experiencing if we invested in their experience of 0 to 8. That the investment in that time of giving them what they need, of giving, not just giving them what they need, but giving their mothers and fathers or caregivers the supports that they need, because really that's going to be the thing that's going to shift what's happening, is when we are supporting the whole family and we're supporting this caregiver who maybe didn't get what they need, and the only way to interrupt this distress and pain that we are seeing year after year increasing, by the way, I think for some of our young people, is to heavily invest in this early care and early childhood, not just the child, but the whole family unit, so that they're having this loving, attuned. You mentioned attunement several times earlier, and attunement, especially for little ones, is so key, because that's where they're getting the mirroring. That's how they're learning how to tolerate the feelings that are coming up for them and organizing. So I'm curious if there's any particular policies or any particular aspects that you want our audience to know about early care and early childhood.
I feel like early care and education has been abandoned. It has been abused. It has been neglected in so many ways. And one of the pieces that constantly rings true is this mental health piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in some way in our society, we need to find a way to bridge, integrate, infuse early care and education and mental health consultation and all of that, and wrap it up in a bow, because that is the foundation. We
Mm-hmm.
need to be supporting the mental health of these babies and young children and their families, and the educators. This is
Mm-hmm.
all about mental health. This is under the umbrella of mental health. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we are able to support secure attachment, if we are able to promote good, healthy emotional development, the ways in which we do that is that we look at it from this mental health lens. And so we intentionally educate our early educators under the same kind of scope of mental health and parenting. We
Mm-hmm.
help from a lens of a mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I found with working with teachers and with working with families, that when you begin to talk to them a little bit about some of this, the nuances of mental health and what's happening with their child or what's happening with them, it's like a light bulb goes off. It's like, nobody ever said that. That makes so much sense. You have people who have degrees, high degrees, that says, I never learned that in school. That connection was never made for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is an opportunity to bridge and link and marry mental health and early care and education, I think that we would be on the right path. I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
in it, right? It's not, nothing's going to be a perfect fix, but if we could start to look at early childhood through a mental health lens, I believe that we would begin to move forward differently.
I love that.
And it's hard to believe, but we're coming to the end of our time together. We only have a little bit of time left, and we'd really love to hear, are there ways people can find you? Are there projects that people can support? Is there something that you would love people to know about what's going on for you and your community?
Well, I work with, like I said, University City Children's Center in St. Louis, Missouri. We are at 6646 Vernon Avenue. And you are more than welcome to come and visit us at any time. And I work with Loom Institute, and you can visit uccc.org is our U three C's
UCCCs.org.
.org. Visit the website, and you'll find a link to Loom's website there, I'm sure, and Facebook, and all the information is there. And if you'd like to message me, as an individual, you can reach me at plott at uccc.org.
Peaches, this has been such a gift. I am so gratified knowing that you're in the world and that you're holding the care of our babies. It means the world to me. And yeah, I can't tell you how much I've just been impacted by your energy today. So I'm really grateful for you being on the show. I needed a little boost in the arm after this week and all that's been happening to women's bodies and rights this week, and the children that they carry. So I'm just deeply grateful to be around you this week. I needed it selfishly. I'm so grateful that you're in the world doing this work and that you took some time to be on our show. So thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, Megan. You are so kind. Thank you, Susan. And you ladies, remember that you are enough. You are doing enough, and I see you.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry again, Peaches.
You would make me cry.
Love you, ladies.
And this is
Love
the
you,
beginning.
Peaches.
This is the beginning of partners. This is you are kin, and
we're sisters.
You're stuck with us now, Peaches. You gotta be careful. we keep
everyone.
Coming back. So anyway, thank you, Peaches.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, like us on Facebook, like us on wherever you listen to your podcast. It really helps. We want to continue to hear from you, and we want to continue to do the show and have amazing guests like Peaches.
Thank you, ladies.